voudrais souhaiter la bienvenue à l'Institut international d'études sur le Moyen-Orient et les Balkans, International Institute for Middle East and Balkan Studies, IFIMES, et qui a organisé ce panel qui va porter sur une dimension importante de la sécurité telle que nous l'étudions dans le cadre de ce forum. C'est la stabilité du Moyen-Orient et ses répercussions sur les Balkans occidentaux. Je vais laisser la délégation et les orateurs se présenter eux-mêmes. Je souhaite que vous connaissiez mieux cet institut, la grande valeur de ses travaux. Et je suis heureux et j'ai été honoré d'être invité à joindre l'advisory board de cette organisation, car il y a peu de think tanks, il y a peu d'organisations de ce genre dans le sud-est de l'Europe qui ait acquis la crédibilité de cette organisation. Le président d'honneur en est le président Josep Mesić, l'ancien président de la Croatie, qui est un vieil ami du Forum de Crans-Montana. Et je souhaite, et je suis persuadé, que cette session sera du plus grand intérêt. Je donne donc la parole au modérateur de la session et je prie chacun des panélistes de bien vouloir se présenter, ce qui permettra en même temps d'expliquer les responsabilités de chacun et ce que fait l'IFIMES. Merci messieurs, merci d'être ici.
Thank you very much. Actually, it's an honor for me to take place in such a high-level activity. Today, we will focus on the stability and security concerns on both Western Balkans and also on the Middle East. And with me today, I will have four distinguished panelists. On my left side, Ambassador Jakovic, who was the US ambassador to Slovenia and Bosnia-Herzegovina for almost 12 years, and who has also carried out significant tasks in Afghanistan in years 2002 and 2003. On my right, retired General Muhammad Aslanhan from Pakistan. He will share his insights with us with his 32 years military plus his academic experience. And to his right, Professor Bayraktarovic, who has very significant tasks on legal and international political issues over the Europe. He will focus also on the issue from different perspectives. Before we pass to the question and answer period, we're going to have some points from Mr. Bakir Ali Spajic, who was the former Minister of Interior of Bosnia and Herzegovina during the war and the former Director of Intelligence in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He will share his ideas with us on crime, corruption, landmines problem, nationalism, and religious extremism in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So, as you're all aware, before the lunch, there was a great panel discussion about the final developments in the Middle East. And personally, I benefited too much of those ideas. And I hope in our panel discussion, we will put additional information about what's going on in the Middle East, also in the Western Balkans from different perspectives. I believe we all are aware that not only the Middle East, also the Balkans as a region has been the focal point for international relations and also for, let me say, great power competition since decades. And since the end of the Cold War, we see that these two regions enter a new phase, promoting clashes, social conflicts, uprisings, and similar effects, and still continue to be the focal point for the global society. I hope at the end of our panel, we will have additional information also from the audience with their questions. Now, I would like to give the first, I would like to give floor to General Muhammad Han to share his ideas with us. He will focus on the geopolitical contours and regional primacy on Western Balkans and Middle East. And I believe, as a Pakistani retired general, he will also give us information about the composition of geostrategic realities and political initiatives from EU perspective. General Muhammad Han, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, the panel mandates for my focus on the subject, as Colonel has said, managing Middle East geopolitical environments that endanger security and stability of Western Balkan. An expose would be given in context of overall European Union philosophy of affording entire Europe an umbrella of peace and prosperity. I would briefly talk about geopolitical contours and the regional primacy in that first Western Balkan region, briefly touching on its geography to refresh our focus. It includes Croatia, Serbia, and Kosovo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, Macedonia, and Albania. To the east lies Eastern Balkan region comprising Romania and Bulgaria. Greece hugs its territory in the southeast. To the north, Slovenia and Hungary sit on top of the Balkans, and to the west, the region has a Adriatic Sea that slants from northwest to southeast direction. Viewing Balkan as Western Balkan region and Eastern Balkan region has been a moot point, as some scholars contend that Balkan could be logically referred to as geographical entity like Northern Balkan and Southern Balkan because a prominent mountain range divides the two that traverses in east-west direction. In the beginning of 19th century, August Zuni, a German geographer, named it Balkan Peninsula after the Bulgarian mountains. As regards Middle East, it sits at the junction of Europe, Asia, and Africa, and thus it dominates strategic approaches leading to the three continents. Impressed by its geostrategic importance, George Lenzowisky remarked in 1952 that still holds the ground, I quote, "No intelligent foreign policy today can ignore the Middle East and its impact upon the rest of the world," unquote. Middle East geography is remarkably simple to grasp, but its internal dynamics make it a land of complex scenarios. The span of Asian territory lying south of erstwhile Soviet Union, west of Pakistan and Egypt included, makes the Middle East. If referred to by the old term Near East, some geographers tend to include Greece as well as Aegean Sea in the Middle East as well. Mainly it can be divided into two zones. The northern belt, that is ethnically non-Arab, and the southern belt, that constitutes Arabs hardcore. In the recent history, Arab-Israel war, Iran-Iraq war, Iraqi attack on Kuwait, and in response, US drubbing of Iraqi forces, US war on Iraq and Afghanistan in post-11 scenario, Israel-Hezbollah conflict, Iran-Israel nuclear tangle, ever-festering Palestinian wound and now Syrian cauldron have reduced Middle East to a blazing inferno. The unfortunate part is that the severity of conflict is likely to exacerbate, then diminish in full view of plethora of peace-restoring institutions, major powers, and above all, human passion and genius. As a consequence, the adjoining regions have come either to the brink of being sucked in or have been impacted dangerously by the fallout of the simmering conflicts one way or the other. I would briefly highlight the asymmetric pattern that we find between the two regions, that is the Western Balkan region and the Middle East. First, European Union has embraced the role of a patron for all its members as well as neighbors where it wishes to introduce peace and prosperity as the means to eliminate historic deficit of mutual harmony among the nation as well as the regions. Middle East has not seen any initiative of this kind. Second, being an economic powerhouse, European Union has no parallel and thus draws the grudge of rogue elements who attempt to violate international laws and resort to such measures that would undermine European Union's ability to achieve its goal, that is peaceful and prosperous united Europe, including its peripheries. Third, European Union serves as an inspiration for the fence-sitter who wants to join European Union. On the contrary, there is no source of inspiration in Middle East. Middle East brims with unemployed youth bulge that should have been a strategic asset for the states. Instead, the youths in the Middle East are inclined to shift their allegiance to become a strategic asset of the non-state actors. In Middle East, the statesmanship is not reconciliatory as it should have been. It generally thrives on the conflicts which the leadership uses as a pivot of popularity and maintaining appeal among their masses. European Union is turning away from the conflicts, denouncing them as execrable phenomena. Sixth, whenever European Union came across a challenge in Western Balkan region, it moved through legitimate organization by implying United Nations, NATO, Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, and Council of Europe. In Middle East, other than United Nations, there exist such apparatuses as Arab League, Gulf Cooperation Council, and an overlap of Organization of Islamic countries, but the consensus on the critical issues among the major Middle East actors is non-existent. Taking on now the crux of the proceedings as far as my part is concerned, the threats that emanate or likely to emanate from the Middle East and that threaten Western Balkan region. First, I would take illegal immigrants traffic. In the wake of visa liberalization for the Western Balkan region, there has been tendency of its immigrants to seek better living standards from relatively poor to the rich states of Western Balkan region or the European Union. The trend is historic and manageable by the Western Balkan region, or at least not as risky as the inflow of Afghans, Pakistanis, Arabs, and Africans who beat the border checkpoints' ability to interdict illegal immigrants. Such illegal immigrants may be criminal, potential terrorist, or arms and drug smuggler, as no record of their credential is available as compared to those falling in the category of regular immigrants. Western Balkan region would certainly be impacted, as the statistics prove. Increasing number of them are appearing on Greece-Turkish, Romanian-Serbian, and Serbian-Macedonian borders. Out of 7,400 detection of irregular traffic in 2011 on the nationality basis, Afghans had leading share of 28%, followed by Pakistanis, that was 25%. Drug trafficking. It poses a threat to the entire world, but predominantly to the Western Europe that makes lucrative market for the drug traffickers. Annual flow of the drugs to the global market is to the tune of 450 tons. Out of this, the statistics of 2011 show 380 tons were produced in Afghanistan only. Finding access to the Western Europe through Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, and Western Balkan region, that is called Western approach, as well as to Russian Federation through Caspian and Central Asia, which is called Northern approach. There have been sizable seizures also, but the drug barons appear determined to swallow the losses for the sake of Western European market that is worth $20 billion, and the Russian Federation market that is worth $13 billion annually. To put simply, when the drug routes of the Western approach from Afghanistan is fairly broad, it converges on Western Balkan region that should rightly worry its government. They are left with no choice but to accept the challenge to eliminate it through operational as well as preemptive strategies in concert with European Union. In other words, European Union is compelled to consider that its stakes are heavy in Western Balkan region while confronted with the drug assault. Terrorism? Terrorists have invariably a political agenda, often ambitious. They enjoy universal alliance, though unspoken, with all such elements in any part of the world across all divides, because their mutual interests have no clash. In other words, at least their sympathizers, if not abettors, are found everywhere that facilitate their clandestine operation of sabotage and destruction. Such vulnerability haunts Western Balkan region because conventionally, drugs, illegal human traffickers, arms smugglers, and terrorists are traditional allies that move hand in glove and follow common trajectory. In Western Balkan region, ordinary crimes have shown decline, but strong footprints of organized crimes have remained indelible. Corruption and crime nexus could not be refuted, particularly when ethnic wars were rampant. And in case of one of the Balkan states now, there has been a Middle Eastern middle sport, though no conclusive evidence has come forth. Not necessarily because it did not exist, but for the possibility that these groups may have managed clandestine sport effectively. Elsewhere, Western Balkan region has remained inwardly focused on ethnic basis, and at least for now has not been enthused by the ideological appeal on which terrorists thrive upon. What Western Balkan region deserves is that they got to evolve happy societies through efficient governance, because threat of terror tends to emerge from poverty-stricken regions and can mutate to areas where instability and chaos rule, even if they are not poor countries. As a response to these threats, the one that is immediately within reach of Western Balkan governments is to focus on the public inspiration and faith in their own states as preemptive strategy, and there is where European Union is committed to help Western Balkan region. Money laundering. The organized crimes perpetrators need to funnel money to give it needed legitimacy or stash it at location where their wealth remains out of sight. To afford the state the desired ability to nab ill-gotten treasures, United Nations Office on Drug and Crimes has been assigned the role to enforce laws to combat money laundering and terror financing in shape of global programs, implying its unit that was established in 1997. The unit mandate was reinforced by the subsequent protocols and legal instruments to enable the state in implementing necessary measures to combat these menaces. The unit also provides guidance and technical assistance. Western Balkan region certainly deserves to up the ante and seek help from United Nations Office on Drug and Crimes. Ladies and gentlemen, I would briefly conclude, and trying to remain within my time, that Western Balkan region deserves break from violence and conflicts. Hence, any effort by the European Union to Western Balkan region emerge as peaceful, secure, and prosperous entity would draw a loud applause internationally. Award of Nobel Peace Prize to European Union is the recent manifestation, as well as an acknowledgement of its peacemaking efforts. On the international scenes, the wisdom is established by simple deduction that fire in the neighborhood would always remain a challenge as well as threat. Therefore, desirability to quell these fire needs no argument. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
General, thank you very much for obeying the time, first of all. As you may see, we officers generally obey this rule. Thank you very much. And at your talk, you focused on the, in general, the EU politics and how its implications coming upon the Western Balkans and also the Middle East. I think from my point of view, I suppose that the European Union is the champion of constructivist politics over the globe, especially on the regions that suffer from today's problems. And I suppose European Union put aside its realist perceptions and do implement constructivist politics upon these two regions. I believe it will help the promotion of peace and stability. Okay, now I turn my left to Ambassador Jakovic. I believe he has also a great experience on Eastern Europe and also the former USSR republics. He will focus on US and also Euro-Atlantic perspective on the Middle East and Western Balkans. Ambassador, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. I want to say just a few comments at the beginning, and that is that I understand this forum has had some really good exchanges of opinion and a variety of points of view that have been expressed here and exchanged. That's excellent, and it's a tribute to the founder and the chairman of the organization, Jean-Paul Carteron, that has happened. I just arrived this afternoon. I haven't been privy to these myself, and I have not experienced them myself, but my associates tell me that this has been a wonderful exchange. I can tell you I did work in Geneva 20 years ago when I headed up the US delegation to the former International Conference on Former Yugoslavia. And so this is a city that I think deserves great tribute in hosting organizations of this nature. Just before the lunch, we also heard from Ms. Tymoshenko. And I know that is not the subject of what we are talking about today, but I must say I personally was very moved, and I think it's an appeal she made on behalf of the Ukrainian people that needs to be heard, needs to be digested, needs to be absorbed, and in the end, needs to be acted upon. We are missing one person that was on the program that you may have read, and that is Mr. Lahur Talabani, the Deputy Director of the National Security Council from Iraq and from Kurdistan. Unfortunately, I met with him just a few days ago, and he was taken away with other business. When you're a government official in Iraq, that's not unusual. So he sends his apologies, and we will sorely miss him in the panel, but we will try to make up for that absence. And finally, I would just like to say by way of introductory comment that, excuse me, I am a United States ambassador, but not on active duty at the current moment, so that my comments here do not reflect the views of the United States government. They are my own personal views. I'll take responsibility personally for all of my own mistakes and errors. Just want to make a few points, and that is to look at a trend that I'm sure we have all monitored over the past several years, and that is the decline of the capabilities, apparently, and the decline of the influence of the United Nations. And I'm sorry to say that in a city like Geneva, which hosts so much of the United Nations apparatus and infrastructure, but it seems to be true. And we see various things happening because of that. Most poignantly, perhaps and most recently, activities by the Turkish government in Syria, which many governments look at and, in fact, welcome. They're very relieved, they're very happy this is happening because somebody is doing something. And we all understand that in the United Nations, very often it's consensus decision-making, it's decision-making with respect for the so-called lowest common denominator, et cetera, et cetera. We all know this. We understand these bureaucratic realities. But what it means is you have other mechanisms that emerge. As an American, I see the emergence, for example, of our so-called coalitions of the willing that went into Iraq, that went into Afghanistan. Of course, they were American-led and American-dominated. We all know the reality. But they were coalitions, and they went into these two places. Libya, I should not leave out Libya, even though Libya, of course, had a United Nations mandate. I can give you one illustration about the United Nations that simply is from my own personal experience because, as I believe you were told, I was the first United States ambassador to Bosnia. This was back during the warfare in 1992 to 1995. I had what they call a briefcase ambassadorship. I didn't have a permanent residence. I didn't have a permanent office. I spent a lot of time in basements, wondering about the gunfire and the grenade fire that was going on above me. But I was the first U.S. ambassador, and I spent 3 years, approximately, in Bosnia and Herzegovina. When the UN came into Bosnia, I recall vividly how they were met with flowers and accolades by the people, which turned within weeks, within short weeks, to stones thrown at those same vehicles. At the beginning, the UN troops, peacekeepers, were going around with open vehicles because they could wave at the people and the people would wave at them. Welcome, you are here to help us. Within weeks, nobody dared to open the hatch on the same vehicles because stones were being thrown. This is very sad. This is very poignant. But it's a poignant illustration that I noticed myself that I simply bring to this panel as an illustration of that decline of capabilities, that decline of influence. I have been fortunate, I would call it, some people would say maybe not so fortunate, but I call it fortunate to have been active in U.S. government service during the period of the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the dissolution of Yugoslavia, which presented us with tremendous challenges. Of course, new states, new emerging states, some of them more viable than others, frankly. But it presented us with tremendous challenges. And now we're looking at a very interesting period where you have the rising power or projection of power by Russia, feeling as it does, perhaps aggrieved by the dissolution of the former Soviet Union. We have, as I said earlier, a series of states that are of varying viability and capabilities on their own to carry on. And we have, I hate to use the cliche, but it's unfinished business in that part of the world. How many times have we heard the discussion about a united Europe, an integrated Europe? But if you look at the Balkans, which 20 years ago and even less was engulfed with warfare and attempts at genocide and atrocities, and the attempt by the European community and the Euro-Atlantic institutions and associations to integrate this region into the rest of Europe, where it belongs, where it must be, where it will be someday. There has been a failure to accomplish that someday, up to this point. What we have succeeded in doing is surrounding the area, corralling it. All the states around it are either NATO or EU or both. But I certainly hope we don't stop there. What is needed is a strong commitment by those states themselves to actually live up to the standards required of these institutions to join them. But we also need a stronger commitment by EU and NATO towards these states to bring them into the association. There is a danger that having corralled the trouble area, we will leave it as such. There is a very big danger that we will do that. I hope we do not. And I hope my own government, the United States government, has tended to say, well, this is a European issue now. We have done our part. We signed the Dayton Accords in Bosnia. We did this, we did that. It's up to the Europeans now. It is, after all, on the European continent. Not quite a correct situation, in my opinion, because the integration, finally, of Europe is a contribution to stability of the Euro-Atlantic community, which includes the United States. We must be more active, we, the United States, as well. But we're facing a time when consolidation of these institutions seems to be happening rather than a look towards expansion. Is there anybody realistically now that expects in the near future a further enlargement of NATO or a further enlargement of the European Union? No. Because of the economic crisis the whole world is facing, because of the need for internal consolidation of these institutions, we're not going to see that in the near future. This is a real danger for the countries that have been left out. Let me turn to another area very briefly. As an American citizen, for the United States government and for the American people at this particular juncture in world developments, I think it is clear that we need to reassess and reconsider and reformulate our relationship with the Islamic world. In the aftermath of the Arab Spring movements and uprisings, this is absolutely critically important for the United States and for the future of United States relations with that part of the world. In my opinion, and again, this is just my opinion, I think it's interesting to look back at United States involvement in Iraq, however that involvement originally developed, and that is a separate discussion and can easily be a separate discussion, as we all know. However it happened, the toppling of Saddam Hussein, it is quite likely, in my personal opinion, that that, in a way, made its own contribution to the beginnings of the Arab Spring movement and uprising. From what I have personally seen and professionally seen in this region, Eastern Europe, former Soviet Union, the Balkans, Southeastern Europe, I think the critically important thing for the states in these regions is regional cooperation, regional associations, particularly at a time, as I addressed earlier, of the decline of the influence of international organizations and the temporary, I would believe, stalemate of the enlargement of Euro-Atlantic associations. And what I mean by this is a stitching together of regional associations, many of which don't exist yet, I would think, but in regions such as the area around Afghanistan, Central Asia, Southeastern Europe, Middle East and North Africa. These are all areas where I think the areas are ripe for regional development, regional cooperation. I can give you an example from Southeastern Europe, where, according to the most recent literature, there are approximately 50 organizations that now bring together the states that the good general from Pakistan mentioned, Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia. It's a wonder. It's amazing. 20 years ago, they were fighting each other, 15 years ago. Today, they're forming organizations. The railways work at fast speed between the countries. The customs areas are facilitated for fast trade of commerce and movement of people. There is an organization in Bucharest where the intelligence and police agencies cooperate together. There is a business advisory council that brings together the businessmen. And you notice none of these things are really political. It isn't the politicians. They come last. The people who come first are the business people, the academics, the people who put together institutions, NGOs, infrastructure. They come first in regional associations. The politics comes later. Well, I think I've expired my time here. I simply wanted to put out some basic thoughts from my own point of view. Again, very much my own point of view. I want to thank the Crans-Montana Forum for hosting us, and I want to thank all of you for remaining on hand Friday afternoon to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I hope the decline of UN capabilities will stop and the power of coalitions of willing, like the ones in Afghanistan, Iraq, would again come up in the future. And we can see a united and integrated Europe embracing the whole Balkans. Now I turn to my right, Professor Bayraktarovic. He's gonna focus on both regions from a different perspective, focusing on the, saying that the approaches of great powers upon the region, like Ottoman Empire and later on the USSR, and great powers in the region, has shed some different and negative implications upon the societal, economical, and political perspectives. Professor, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished guests, organizers, thank you so much for inviting me. I'll try also to be as fast as possible. and brief. I'm not structured in the sense that I don't have any prepared speech, but I brought a couple of latest publications from IFMS, so you are more than cordially invited to take a look at them. It's very difficult actually to talk about Middle East and Balkans in few minutes after lunch when so many panelists were exchanging great ideas before, and to be crispy, sexy, and brief at the same time. There is one point, so either because I'm from the academic world, so either you have conferences in which people say, or you have conferences which are attended by people who are on a pay. So the governmental people are on pay and they are not much on a say, because they, of course, represent government, so they watch out what they are talking. And then the people from silly academic world like me, they talk a lot because they are pretty much detached from realities. And Crans-Montana is an excellent forum which tries actually to make some sort of reconciliation between those two worlds of say and the pay. So don't mind me if I'm a little bit more on a say than on a pay, because as you know, the first budgetary cuts are going always from science and not from defense or from interior. The Balkans and the Middle East. There are several layers, so I will just give a few hints on this. In geopolitics, you talk about the peripheral central powers and all other things. Okay, so in the modern history of the Balkans and the Middle East, you have a soft center and the peripheral, predominantly strong players which are pressing on the center. This is a pre-Bismarck Germany or pre-Bismarck Europe. So there are many other regions. One of the let's say big tectonic moves in Asia is coming because the Central Asian plateau is not any longer weak. It exceeds some certain pressure which is coming from China. It's reminiscence of the Imperial Germany and so on and so forth. Okay, so we have different players from the Byzantium times or even before, from Persia, Greeks, who were controlling the region. But since the end of First World War, what appeared is actually that the federation of theocracies, which was based on non-territorial principle, has been dismantled. And the European powers defeating Ottoman Empire, actually dividing the spoils there, brought also the notion of the nation state. And this is one of the first and fundamental problems of Middle East and of Balkans. And our distinguished friends from sub-Saharan Africa will agree, nation state does not work. It's a clear cut in France, it's clear cut in Spain, in Portugal, in many parts of Europe, which was historically underpopulated. But in the region, where is the mix of people, or the regions which are connecting three continents, this simple nation territorial principle does not hold the water. And that's one of the fundamental problems. So what happened basically between the First World War and up to nowadays is the absence between, so the region was, or the peoples, or the nations, however you determine those individuals populating those areas which we call state, this, state, that, okay? So they've been moving between the absence of any government, predatory elites who were supported or installed by the foreign or external players, up to the purposely set dysfunctional government. My country of origin is a beautiful example of the country with actually purposely made dysfunctional government. So Bosnia, or several places with the NATO intervention, were places with a purposely set dysfunctional government. Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, purposely dysfunctional. So they don't function per their definition. So this is one hint that I want to give you. The second hint is the EU role in the whole thing. So EU has capability, has history, has prehistory, has institutions, has instruments, also credibility, basically, and the mandate. The mandates, and that's also one of the problems of the EU. So you see that newspapers are full of Armageddon-like titles, you know, about the end of Euro, about end of EU. The problem on a fundamental layer is rather simple. Austerity does not bring prosperity. Austerity is a game about control. If we really want sincerely a recovery of EU, we will then return to something which is a Lisbon strategy, and we will create jobs. We will again connect disconnected cross-generational contract. We have abandoned our youth. You know, in the country that I'm living, Austria, what do you think how many MPs in parliament are below the age of 30? One. You know, so we talk about cross-generational contract which is failing. Okay, so that's one segment. The problem of something which has been forgotten, disregarded. There was a Lisbon strategy, there was a midterm review of 2005, there was a Göteborg strategy. We have simply disregarded, forgotten instruments that we have. There is a Barcelona process, there is a Euro-Mediterranean partnership through the OSCE mechanism, which I do believe that is a backbone of the peace and stability of Europe, although EU is also a peace project. So what is happening? The intervention of Europe on the Middle East comes from the coalition of willing, notably from the Atlantic part of Europe. On one side, you have actually the Nord Stream pipeline brokered between Germany and Russia, which of course creates a negative sentiment and a lot of feelings in the Atlantic flank of Europe. And then instead of returning and reaffirming, strengthening the instruments that we have, either within the EU or within the OSCE forum, which is then the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership or Barcelona, we have completely other setup. Don't be mistaken, guys. The sort of Islam that we supported yesterday in Middle East and the way, the means we deployed in supporting this Islam yesterday is the Islam that we get today in Europe. And therefore, Islam in Istanbul, Islam in Bishkek, Islam in Jakarta is tolerant, liberal. But the Islam in Oslo, in Paris, and in London is dismissive, brutal, arrogant, and dangerous. So you get what you actually try to promote. So basically, those are, let's say, few hints that I was feeling like adding. As I said, and as I excused at the beginning, so this is more on the say than on a pay. Okay, thank you.
Professor, thank you very much for the very interesting points you brought to our attention, sir. And now, before we enter the question and answer phase of our panel, I want to give floor to Mr. Bakir Ali Spajic, the former Minister of Interior of Bosnia and Herzegovina during the war. He will share his ideas with us for about 4 or 5 minutes, sir. If you obey the time, I will appreciate that. Thank you. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Želim da pozdravim prisutne dame I gospođe.
First, I would like to greet distinguished guests.
Ja dolazim iz Bosne I Hercegovine I mislim da sam jedan od rijetkih koji još uvijek može da svjedoči onome što se desilo u Bosni I Hercegovini, a među nama se nalazi bivši ambasador Sjedinjenih Država Viktor Jaković, koji također, pored mene, može svjedočiti o tom vremenu.
I come from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I'm one of the witnesses of atrocities and war in Bosnia, just like distinguished ambassador Viktor Jaković, who was there during the war.
Obzirom da nisam ambasadora vidio dugi niz godina, ja mu se još jednom zahvaljujem na velikom doprinosu koji je dao za vrijeme dok se nalazio na dužnosti ambasadora, dok je bio rat u mojoj zemlji.
And considering that I haven't seen Mr. Jaković for a long time, I will take this opportunity to thank him for his large contribution during his tenure as ambassador in Bosnia.
Nažalost, ne mogu reći da je rat u Bosni I Hercegovini završen. Mislim da je to nastavak drugim sredstvima, političari bi rekli političkim putem.
Unfortunately, I can't say that the war in Bosnia is over. It has continued perhaps in a different form.
Kako se što uspješnije borili protiv tog stanja, te situacije koja nije samo bosanska, ona je I regionalna pa I šire, ja bih ukazao na neke stvari koje smatram bitnim na tom putu.
And in order to be more successful in combating such situation, which is not just a local, but it has affected and it is affecting the larger region, I would just like to list a few security risks or challenges.
Smatram da bi bilo neophodno posvetiti mnogo više jednu dužnu pažnju sljedećim naporima, odnosno sigurnosnim izazovima.
And I believe that we should focus on and pay more attention to the following security risks or challenges.
Kriminal kao jedan od bitnijih koji je dostigao jedne razarajuće dimenzije, koji jednostavno uništava sve i koji još uvijek ne dozvoljava da se zemlja oporavi.
The crime, as always, that has now reached some high, let's say, very destructive point, and that doesn't really allow the country to recover itself.
Drugi bitan moment je korupcija koja je zahvatila skoro čitavo društvo, koje se bezuspješno za sad bori sa tim fenomenom, a kome treba dati veliku pažnju.
Then the question or issue of corruption that has now contaminated all levels of the society, and that requires lots of attention and action, appropriate action.
Imamo jedan apsurd gdje se često dešava da borba protiv korupcije bude i vid korupcije.
We have one absurd, we would say bizarre situation where official fight against corruption actually hides or has in its rows corruption per se.
U Bosni imamo još jedan veliki problem koji i rješava međunarodna zajednica. Radi se o velikoj količini mina i minsko-eksplozivnih sredstava koje su ostale u našoj zemlji.
Landmines remain big problem in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And there are local organizations supported by the international community that have been dealing with this problem and still are.
Pored velikih napora koji su urađeni na tom planu, znači bez rata, od rata do danas je poginulo 588 stanovnika naše zemlje.
And despite of all the efforts, a total of 588 people have been killed by landmines or unexploded ordnances.
Pored toga želim da istaknem i problem nacionalizma i religijskog ekstremizma koji je također ostatak i posljedica rata i dešavanja nakon rata.
And besides all the before mentioned, I would also like to point the big problem of nationalism and religious extremism as one of the consequences of the war.
Religijski ekstremizam, da ne kažem terorizam, je pojam novijeg vremena.
Religious extremism and terrorism are, let's say, a term or phraseology of a new time.
Dalje bih želio da ukažem na problem, odnosno situaciju oko nepriznavanja Kosova od strane Srbije, imajući u vidu da je niz zemalja priznalo ovu novu državu, a to smatramo jednim od problema koji se tiče regiona, a na određen način može i da bude i doveden u vezu sa problemima u mojoj zemlji.
One of the problems I would like to underline is also recognition, or let's say absence of recognition of Kosovo by Serbia, that can affect or maybe enlarge the security risks in the region as well as in my country.
Želio bih još da ukažem na etnocentrizam kao jedan od problema, odnosno fenomena koji se dešava na prostoru.
One of the underlying problems in the Western Balkans is also, we would call it ethnocentrism.
Također, u Bosni i Hercegovini imamo slabe institucije vlade koje su još nedovoljno osposobljene, izgrađene, da se nose sa ovim i nizom drugih problema koji su kompleksni.
And last but not the least are weak and inefficient, let's say, government institutions that are too weak and therefore incapable to deal with the aforementioned problems.
Nadalje bih htio da ukažem i na neke stvari koje smatram kao stabilizacijskim faktorima koje bi trebalo poduzimati, među kojima je u prvom redu borba protiv terorizma na lokalnom, regionalnom i svjetskom planu.
However, there are some stabilization factors The first one would be fight or combat against terrorism at the local, national and the regional level in the said region.
Bilo bi jako neophodno da se odluke, odnosno koncept Europske unije na nivou Europske unije što prije realizuje, odnosno da se omogući zemljama Balkana pa i Bosni i Hercegovine da što prije postanu članicama EU kako bi na taj način prevazišli mnoštvo problema s kojima se suočavaju.
The key to solving aforementioned problems is definitely integration of the Western Balkans region into the European Union.
I da ne bi opterećivao previše skup, predlažem i smatram da bi međunarodna zajednica trebala uzeti u obzir i nekoliko sljedećih momenata.
And of course, not to burden this panel, as a conclusion, I would like to make a few recommendations for the European Union.
Znači ubrzavanje i osnaživanje zemalja za što brži ulazak u Europsku uniju.
To enable countries of the Western Balkans region to enter into the European Union or to integrate.
Svestrana pomoć i otvaranje perspektive malima umjesto prikrivene eksploatacije.
Holistic help and support and the opening perspectives for, let's say, the little one instead of hidden exploitation.
Izbjegavanje oružane intervencije koje kada su najuspješnije održavaju i postiču revanšizam, da ne kažem osvetu.
Avoidance of the armed interventions which even when they're most successful they maintain and they provoke vengeance.
Razvijanje objektivističkih naučno-prognostičkih istraživanja.
And of course development and support of the scientific approach to the security as such.
I na kraju želim podvući da društvena sigurnost i svaki oblik sigurnosti čovjeka podrazumijeva veoma razvijen, stabilan moral i sistem orijentacioni vrijednosti.
And last but not the least, I would like to conclude that the security, that the community safety and every form of human security presupposes very well developed and stable morals and system of values.
Još jednom zahvaljujem se organizatoru i zahvaljujem se svima koji su me saslušali. Hvala puno.
Thank you very much and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ali Spajic. Now we have about 10 minutes for the question and answer period. At the beginning of the question and answer period, I would like to give the first chance to Mrs. Kuchi, who is the Minister of Niger Delta Affairs of Nigeria. Ma'am, you have 2 minutes to comment, and then if you have any question, we may get it. Later on, I'll turn to the audience. Just 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My comments are based on is it the peer? Mr. Baktrarik. I somehow worried about his comments on the austerity measures. Austerity measures, I believe, are ways to an end, and that there are possibilities in austerity measures if properly applied to issues. And I want him to expatiate more on that. And unfortunately, the ambassador got up. Listening to him, I got a bit worried in that it would be lovely and nice to have absolute positions from him. And if you look at the Middle East, you want a more on-the-hands, actual situations, which we maybe make us here understand more, a way of forging forward instead of just fluid commentaries. I think those are the perspectives I have on the panels.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much. Now I return to the audience. Okay, any questions?
If it's not nation states, then what do you propose as an alternative for those states? You said that nation states are not a good, viable form of ethno-territorial administrative government for countries in Africa, Middle East, Eastern Europe. What do you propose to replace it with? Something that's better, that would work better for those countries, for those people?
The alternative is to escape the blind obedience and to reaffirm and to put a little faith on thinking, on independent thinking. So there is a connection between those two things, you know. So we have turned the economic thought into exegesis, you know. Religion have been changed, completely diverted into the radical ideology, and the economic science. The best in science is to prove and disapprove every single day. But we have turned into exegesis the economic thought which is 300 years old, and we don't move. We just wait and we offer a little bit more of the same, and this is our fundamental problem. Our fundamental, our crisis is not economic crisis. This is a deep moral crisis, and this is a crisis of thought, because people who are sitting are either incapable of solving the situation, or they have solution, but they say, okay, it's not time to talk. Wait, withhold, don't display your opinion. Don't opinionate, don't show that you are thinking. So that's one of the problems. And the question is, do we live up to the last Greek to save euro? Euro, for God's sake, is one of the instruments. So what is our purpose? What is our aim? You go to Croatia and you ask, for example, our friends in Croatia, they say, our aim is to join the Atlantic Euro-Atlantic forums. And I say, for God's sake, you are in Adriatic Sea. How you can join something which is in Atlantic Ocean? It's the wrong geography. It's eventually a means, not the aim. Aim is fulfillment of the entire population. So we should be living better. And if means of euro or of this sort of let's say, conducting the business of European Central Bank, of tax policy, of whatever items and issues, which are rather technical issues, if they are not working, we have to come and to reflect, to rethink and revisit our best legacies, our best practices, and return back to something which would serve our ends better, but not blind obedience to the means that we have once upon a time decided. This is one of the fundamental problems, because every crisis comes at the end to be a moral crisis, a crisis of thought. So nation state, in the way how it has been brokered, invented by the legacy of political culture of Europe, is not applicable for Middle East. And we are torturing Middle East, and we are torturing Balkan for decades, and it does not work, and we just hold a beat, and then we offer more of the same. It's simply not a political culture of sub-Saharan Africa, and not to go into culture. But there are different solutions. So one of the, let's say, understated things in the literature is actually to examine how Ottoman Empire have managed. I'm not a revivalist, you know, and I'm not someone who is glorifying empires at all, you know, present or the past empires. But there is apparently some merit in the conduct of this empire, which was non-territorial federation. It was theocratic, brutal, oppressive. But on the minority and ethnic and religious or even racial rights, very liberal, very tolerant, and very modern. Actually, not far from the city that I was born, the first political document, or legal, if you want, about the respect of the religious freedoms has been issued by once upon a time Sultan of Ottoman Empire, who granted Christians explicitly the right of confession. So those things, for example, some legacies that we have produced also in other parts of Europe have been simply disregarded. And the question is that we have, as Jean Monnet used to say, when you have unsolvable dilemma, you enlarge the context. You don't offer more of the same, you enlarge the context. And that's how actually young or early EU has been developed. And just a quick reference, so I'll let the floor back.
Okay, Professor. Thank you very much. So maybe we get some other questions for the panelists. Okay, sir, over there.
Thank you very much. I think it's unfortunate that Ambassador Jakovic is not coming back, but I would be really intrigued to hear his analysis of his claim that, you know, the United States-led invasion of Iraq has made the Arab Spring somehow possible. This is quite an interesting thesis when considering that all of the regimes that were toppled were very strong US allies, from Yemen to Egypt to Tunisia to Libya. And the plot thickens when we go to Syria, who is supposed to be an erstwhile enemy of the United States, and yet it doesn't offer any kind of strong support for the Syrian people who are being massacred at the moment. If you take this back to Iraq itself, after the death of almost 1 million civilians, the wasting of almost $3 trillion, 800 billion of which was paid by the American taxpayers, we find that the net result is that Iraq is now a strategic ally of Iran, which is another erstwhile enemy of the United States of America. So if somebody has some ideas on how to grapple with this issue, unfortunately, the Ambassador's Northwest would be interesting to hear.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I think General Aslanan has some words to say for this.
Before I answer your question, let me refer to a small talk I was having with the moderator. I said I have found out during this conference or before this conference, once I was listening to the previous panels, that why do they give 10 minutes? I said 10 minutes are given because you raise more questions than you give answers. So that is very pertinent question. It has come because in 10 minutes one cannot cover the entire spectrum of the geostrategy and geopolitical environment. What I can pick up from your question is that you are trying to draw a resemblance and parallel between Iraq and Syria. Now that is true that United States took on Iraq with certain kind of dissension within its own allies, and therefore United Nations did not lend legitimacy to United States venture into Iraq, even if from the United States point of view it was very much required. But then it has become a debatable point now that whether the pretext under which United States attacked Iraq were they correct. And most of the Americans, they are saying themselves that they were not correct. Anyway, in case of Syria, the situation is much more compounded because we have the ultimate peace restoration institution, and that is United Nations. And within United Nations, we have the ultimate body that says yes or no is the Security Council. Unfortunately, as far as the Syria is concerned, because of the vested interest of the big powers, there is a split among the Security Council permanent members, Big Five. Now, why United States is not coming in the arena? Because if United States comes in the arena, there is a possibility of reaction, if not retaliation. And United States doesn't only want to play a bluff game, because generally bluff depends not only on one's own intelligence, but it depends on the intelligence of the opponent also, who might take the bluff, who might not take. Therefore, United States is cautious that if my opponents do not take the bluff, then the conflict is going to get internationalized. Therefore, the Turkey and the United States, in the framework of the NATO context, they are trying that Syria cauldron must remain sort of regionalized, and it should not get internationalized. So that is a limitation, perhaps, that we are not finding the quick fix solution as far as Syria is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General. I thought maybe we could have another question, but now I received a warning that time is over. Thank you very much. I appreciate the forum and your close attention. Thank you very much, and I would like a hand for our panelists. at the end of this one. Thank you.
Međunarodni institut za bližnjoshodne i balkanske studije IFIMES iz Ljubljane je skupaj s Crans-Montana forumom organizirao ta panel izzivi i spremembe od Zahodnega Balkana do Bližnjega vzhoda. To je v bistvu sad sodelovanja z ambasadorom Carterunom, Jean-Paulom Carterunom, ki je ustanovitelj in predsednik Crans-Montana foruma, ki je pred nekaj meseci tudi postal član našega advisory boarda in bomo še naprej sodelovali na različnih projektih, pa tudi bomo nadaljevali tisti projekt, ki smo ga prav zdaj začeli.
Thank you very much. I think we had a fantastic experience as far as coming here and taking part in this forum, where IFIMES has been represented very strongly. And the subject we dealt with, certainly they have a tremendous global significance. Apparently they look small and confined to, say, Middle East region or Western Balkan region, but their connotation and the implication could be far more serious. And this is a very timely debate because difficulty or the challenges identified at the right moment can find the right remedies at the right time. Therefore, it is a very worth experience that we have gone to identify the challenges. And once the challenges are identified, I think the Western Balkan region is all set under the patronage of European Union that they will be able to explore the required solution, and that too very amicably, because that is the emphasis and the theme of the European Union, that they must move forward with consensus. They must be making peace rather than through dissent or through differences among the part of the regional as well as the European neighbors and allies. I think that was a wonderful experience.
This is actually very, very hot issue concerning the Balkans and the Middle East. As an old military staff and a new, let me say, an academician, I appreciate it very much to take place in this activity. Hope IFIMES gets more active, not in the Balkans also. I would like to see IFIMES taking activities in Turkey also as well. I believe in the coming years, Middle East will continue to gather attention of the global society in many aspects. So, taking this chance, I would like to thank the IFIMES staff for inviting me to this high-level activity and hoping to see you in future activities. Thank you very much.
Well, I would just like to say that I think the Crans-Montana Forum is a very interesting opportunity for people from different parts of the world, Africa, South America, Asia, Europe, to come together and discuss things. I hope they not only discuss things, but they take back concrete ideas that they turn into concrete projects. This would be the main thing. But it's actually very, very interesting, very, very useful, and I think there should be more forums and exchanges of this nature. I'm very honored that I was able to participate myself.
The platform of Crans-Montana has given us a lot of opportunities, you know. From my understanding since my attendance here, it's an unbiased platform whereby governments as well as private sectors could come and say their mind and say the things that they think about peace issues and issues of security that they find challenging in their nation.
Crans-Montana is a very important forum, one of the most influential, maybe together with Davos Forum, that's absolutely of influence of, let's say, very important side meetings, informal gatherings. What is a novelty and what I was very much positively surprised about is the IFIMES role and the attachment given by Crans-Montana to IFIMES, and I would say that actually this is really a big recognition. I don't know how much people in Slovenia or the rest of the Western Balkans are comprehending or understanding these big forums, but it's a big day actually for IFIMES. That's what I would definitely say. And on the conference, business as usual, of course. Once you come to conference, it repeats, of course, itself. So it's an opportunity for lobbying, for expressing views and interests. It's one of the, maybe after Davos, is the biggest concentration of the practitioners in the world. So here in the rooms we have several presidents, ministers, acting past presidents, ministers, future. So it's an excellent opportunity to be seen and to be heard. And therefore, I'm really very, let's say, happy today to see that IFMS was getting such a recognition and actually getting peak pride time for its own panel, which was also excellent.
What was amazing was Professor Anis, his new expose on current issues, on issues of statehood in Africa and how state formations in Africa and Asia may not have worked according to the European model. He brought a new dimension, a new thought, provoking concepts that I want to really go back again, consult him, and then develop more on them. They are innovative, they are different. He was thinking outside the box. And this is, I think, is a great area to pursue after this forum.
D'abord, je veux me présenter. Je suis maître Dismas Magbengu, Swana Emina Monzia. Je suis le vice-ministre congolais de la coopération internationale et régionale, venu représenter mon gouvernement au sommet mondial sur les crimes transnationaux. Et de ce qui a été débattu le long de ce sommet, primo, il faut noter que les menaces contre les ports, contre comment dirais-je, les navires le long des côtes africaines constituent, comment dirais-je, la distance la plus importante. Et sécuriser ces ports revient à dire qu'il faut endiguer la piraterie maritime, n'est-ce pas, qui empêche aux navires et aux passagers d'œuvrer librement le long des côtes ou de circuler librement. Il faut endiguer la piraterie, il faut endiguer et pourquoi pas permettre une certaine sécurisation de nos ports, la sécurisation de voies maritimes le long des côtes. Hein? Donc c'est ce qui est plus préoccupant. Et des deux, ces concepts, le concept de sécuriser, elle est plus originelle parce que liée à la liberté du commerce, liée à la liberté de l'homme, liée à la liberté de mouvement. Donc les gens doivent circuler librement, effectuer le commerce librement, le long des côtes, à bord des navires, faire tout ce qu'ils peuvent faire sans être inquiétés par qui que ce soit. Donc voilà un peu de mots, ce que je peux résumer de ce forum.
I really enjoyed yesterday the panel discussions and all these important issues that are raised regarding security in Africa, Middle East, Balkan region, and with a focus on Africa, of course, as you can see all these delegates. And it was really, for me, it was really important to get this awareness, and it's just important that people gather to discuss all these issues on the security, on the development and focus of human rights and democracy, and it's really, really important.
No nation should stand alone because we can't afford to be alone. We have to build cohesions, we have to actually deploy resources and be able to manage our security issues.
Inštitut je zbral svoje vodilne strokovnjake, ki prihajajo iz Pakistana, iz Avstrije, iz Združenih držav Amerike, iz Turčije, in na koncu se je pokazalo, da so številni udeleženci tega panela pokazali zelo veliki interes za ta panel, za ta dogodek, kar nam je tudi spodbuda, da takšne in podobne dogodke bomo še naprej organizirali in v sodelovanju s Transmontana forumom ali sami ali s drugimi organizacijami.